I have felt very, very much the presence of my dad in everything that I do. And there there was a lot of things that I think happened to me internally when he passed away, but I began work less than 2 months on my very first film after he passed away, and I don't think the two things are. I don't think those things are not connected. It's an
Yeah.
awkward way to say it. I believe that there is a very strong connection between those two events.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that because I feel very connected to that. And I also just love for our audience to hear how deep we can go because more often than not, I'll start a podcast with like a sexy intro and then we'll jump in. And I literally told our producer just now, I was like, dude, let's do a rolling start. We're having too much fun right now. And so for our audience that may not know our guest today, welcome back to Allsmith, everybody. Today we're joined by an Emmy Award winning filmmaker and storyteller whose work has shaped the way we view sports, education, and the human condition. If you haven't picked it up already, he has this very unique ability to go deep and connect the dots in ways that most people cannot. And he's famous for his docu-series, including Last Chance U, Cheer, Wrestlers, things that you've seen on Netflix, and most recently, The Clubhouse, a year with the Boston Red Sox. He has this unique gift in capturing the raw humanity of his subjects. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to introduce Greg Whiteley. Thanks so much for being here, Greg.
I feel like we should just stop right there. There's
Period.
that
Done.
intro is the high mark of it's the high mark of my career. What a generous and beautiful intro. Thank you for whoever compiled that. You and your team. That sounds like that has your fingerprints all over it, Bryce.
Yeah, man. I mean, we've observed what you've got going on for a long time. We're big fans of your work. But as you described with your father and with your experience to connect the dots into your next project, something that you have, Greg, is you realize that people will forget what you say, they'll forget what you did, but they never forget the way you made them feel. And you have this ability in how you film your docu series to allow people to feel safe. It doesn't become like reality TV where you're almost like challenging somebody to act in a certain way so that way it can create controversy. You're doing this safe space where it's almost like you're a fly on the wall while people are unapologetically going through the peaks and valleys of the human experience. And I'm curious like if that landed on your headspace as to how to observe and if you knew with your vision that you were kind of peeking around the corner as to how the world wanted to view content because modern day everybody wants behind the scenes. And when I observe what you've got going on, it's those private conversations behind closed doors. And then you get to see how those conversations unfold in real time on the court or on the field or in competition. Do you think about that when you're trying to observe and curate a storyline as far as just kind of you want them to be safe and unapologetically themselves as opposed to feeling like a camera's like right in their face and then they might change their natural human behavior?
Well, you're touching on a couple of things, and the short answer is yes. We're me and the people that I work with. We are obsessed with uh, that principle. However, how I feel like we need to achieve it, it might be helpful for me to back up and explain what I sort of see as our goal.
Okay.
People talk about. I remember when I was taking an art history class, somebody was describing the conversation that this painter is having with the world, and I'd never thought of it that way.
Hmm.
I think there is a classic view of an artist in which this artist, he or she, goes and toils in anonymity, and then there's this work that's produced, and then we get to discover it and enjoy it. Um, a different way to look at it is people like Van Gogh, Rembrandt, etc. These artists that we revere, they're very intentional about every brushstroke, even the subject that they pick. That they are anticipating and hoping that there will be this audience that will see it. In fact, in Van Gogh's work, so much of his work is an attempt to illustrate for this brother Theo that he loves, that is living in another town. You've got to see this sunset. It's happening right over a field of grain. I can't even describe it. Let me, I've got to paint it for you. So it's that sort of energy. I feel like with the work that we're doing, we're involved in this conversation. And Bryce, I think you're very good at this naturally in conversations that you have with people, where sometimes let's say you're at a party, and you happen upon somebody, and you're talking to this individual, and you get the sense that there is an agenda that they've got. There's like a pet cause that they have, and almost every syllable that comes out of their mouth, even when they're asking you a question and they're listening, you can see the gears turning in their head, waiting for them and a chance to sort of mold the thing that you're talking about back into the groove of their agenda. And pretty soon the conversation just starts to get exhausting. It's stale. Sometimes if you share the same agenda, you can riff off each other a little bit, but it's not nearly as exciting as somebody, when you're talking to them, you can feel a sincere interest
Oh yeah.
from them in who you are. And they don't know what you're about to say, but you can feel that they're interested. And there is a kind of confidence that gives you to sort of let down some guards and reveal a kind of part of your humanity. So, how do you translate that into filmmaking? I think there's two things generally that we're trying to do. The first is we have an obligation as the filmmaker, when we're present with subjects and we're filming them, to film them in a way that is respectful of who they are. If I go into, for instance, the show that we're working on currently, if I go into a rehearsal with the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders, and I think, oh, I know what this is about. These are cheerleaders and they're X, Y, and Z. And so I've just got to look for these kinds of shots that are going to pay off this expectation I have of who they are, as opposed to showing up. Maybe I've got some expectations, but allowing those expectations to give way to what is new and what is really happening in this experience. And that became critical in that show, because they had been on a very different kind of show for 17 years already, a successful show. So to just go and recreate that would have been a waste of time, and I don't think would have garnered much audience interest. I mean, there was a reason why that show went away. They had run its course. But I do think one of the things that I've learned that you have to do is, I've got to, as a filmmaker, I've got to be completely honest with them. And so to sit maybe on a long lens where they don't even know that I'm filming them and they forget I'm there, sometimes that's necessary because I can't physically be on the field of play when they're, in Last Chance U, when it's a football game, and I just need a long lens because I want to get a close up of the quarterback's eyes. But in most moments, what we try and do is we try and pick lenses that require the cinematographer or other camera operators to physically get close. And what that does is the subject then gets to choose whether or not they're going to allow their real humanity to come out. Some people, when you physically get that close, they begin to kind of perform. They begin to put on a bit of a facade where it's not really who they are. Other people are so intimidated by that they'll literally turn to the camera and say, hey, not right now. And we just said, okay, in either of those instances, we're either going to wait out a moment in which we don't feel like we're getting authentic stuff from the subject. Or if they tell us to go away, we always go away. They are the ultimate. They have the ultimate say in those moments of whether or not they're going to be filmed. But we need them to physically know that we are there filming them. And then when they choose to be vulnerable and human, it is as though they're giving a gift to the audience. They may not think of it that way, but that's how it comes across to the audience. There's a real warmth. Even if what you're capturing is sometimes some pretty dark stuff, there is this kind of warmth. And the only way I can describe it is it's the same feeling we always get when somebody at a party chooses to be vulnerable with you, and you can feel that there are stakes and they're willing to take that leap, and there's something that you feel a kind of sacred trust. I've seen very complicated people that under normal circumstances would be dismissed. You'd be inclined to think, oh, that person's just a racist, or that that person's just a misogynistic fool, and you dismiss them. But when they choose to be vulnerable, in spite of their complexities, you tend to want you tend to root for them, and you want to understand it. It's not as though you're now ignoring the parts of it that you find complicated, but you're they start to break your heart, because when somebody's true humanity is coming out, you simultaneously are getting a glimpse of what they could be. And I think that's a way more interesting way to tell stories than I think the reality TV way, which is you lean into their tropes. You want to hang back on a longer lens because you're hoping to catch them with their guard down where they say or do something. And then the subjects that I've seen reality TV producers tend to gravitate towards are the subjects that are the most bombastic. They don't care if the cameras are running. In fact, they want the cameras running, and they're going to try and give those cameras exactly what they think the cameras want. And that invariably ends up being this very two-dimensional flat image.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think those shows have a very long shelf life. I think they feel almost like gas station candy.
Yeah, that's well said. I also love that you touched on humanity, because that's common ground for everybody. And based on what I'm hearing you say, Greg, there's three words that come to mind that are near and dear to my heart. Seek to understand. Okay, 70% of the time this person behaves this way. But rather than being judgmental of it, what you guys are doing is you're curating a curiosity of the audience. Why are they that way? What happened along the way where they started to shift their lenses and put on a pair of, maybe let's just say hypothetically, pessimistic lenses, or they started to speak this way or act this way? And like you said, when there's vulnerable moments, which the human experience is going to deconstruct everybody's ego at some way, shape, or form, physical, mental, emotional, financial, loss, those things inevitably are going to happen. And what I've really appreciated is exactly what you said. You're not necessarily capturing the moments to highlight the negative betrayal of one's emotions and watch them go off the rails. You might show a glimpse of that because it's the reality of human reaction, but then you get to see the process a little bit. And I just heard a speech last night from LeBron. They were asking, hey man, like you're going into year 22 in the NBA, like why? And he basically said, I really love the game still, but more importantly, I still love the process. And being able to see how people process the human experience when it's related to sport and performance, and you're in this scenario of you're trying to be a human and take care of yourself, you have these expectations within your job circle to go perform this way, or you're trying to do this thing to get to the next level in the thought of Last Chance U. There's a lot of pressure there. And you and I both know the famous quote, pressure can be a privilege. Pressure can bust a pipe, but pressure can also make a diamond. And I think holding space for that curiosity and really having the best interest in the individual and creating that upfront expectation with them that like, hey, we're trying to make you look like you. That's not necessarily good or bad. We're just trying to capture the authentic you. And that's not happening right now in most of media that I'm observing, because it's not the quick hit. It's not the 15-second reel that's going to get the clicks and the all the things. It requires a little bit of context. And my next question for you, Greg, is context is hard because it requires patience from the audience and the consumer. And in order to get patience, You have to create that trust. How have you thought in your mind, how do you curate that trust with the audience so they don't just get bored and be like, hey, I'm going to turn this off and watch something else that's more of a quick hitter?
Well, I think if you were to go and look at the top 10 list in Netflix, and you were to focus only on the non-scripted shows, uh, how often a, a non-scripted show that does happen to crack the top 10 is one of those shows that I would say is very quick hitting. Like they aren't trying to be as intentional or thoughtful, respectful of the audience's agency, let alone the subjects that they're filming. And so it is a real battle. I think all the time there is a constant tension between making something that's compelling and entertaining, and that is simultaneously staying true to our values as filmmakers. Because I can see plenty of times where there is, if we were to treat this character, if we were to include just this little soundbite slightly out of context, that would be really salacious, and it would really move this storyline, and I know it would hook an audience. However, in the 20 years now that I've been doing this as a living, I have learned that always, not 9 times out of 10, but 10 times out of 10, when you resist that impulse and look for the more nuanced and true reason why somebody is saying something and giving it its greater and more full context for why they might have said that quip, the story always becomes more interesting. Now, is there are we creating an audience over time that will lose taste in that sort of filmmaking? I don't think it's happened yet. Our shows do very, very well. Our shows that we do on Netflix are among the most popular shows, period, that are done on Netflix, let alone non-scripted. But I have worried, Bryce. I have worried that you, if you raise a people, it's kids that are now digesting this stuff, that can come at them without any nuance. And unless they learn to, I think, develop or appreciate something deeper, it's very much like being raised on a certain kind of diet. You may just over time crave only that, and you may never develop a taste for vegetables and the types of proteins that are going to make you healthy. And so I do worry about it, but so far it's not been true. It's been the opposite.
That's very well said, Greg. Like nutrition is so much more than just the foods that we consume. It's the energy we're around, the environments we're in, the things that we choose to watch, see, and feel, and what we allow to penetrate our headspace or what we grant a permission slip to live amongst our being. And I think you're right. Like as the world continues to change and evolve with social media culture and X and Twitter and Threads and obviously Instagram and TikTok, it is changing. And we're seeing AI kind of jump in as well, which is making a lot of it's curating a lot of distrust. Like how do you know what's real, what's crafted? And even though some things there's that level of uncertainty, like I feel like when I watch things from One Potato Productions, it's tangibly real. It's REAL instead of REEL. And the reason why I say it like that is that the more personal, the more universal. I think as humans, we're going to go through stuff, and that might take longer for some people, whether that's loss, whether that's a breakup, whether that's getting fired from a job, whether that's seemingly just feeling like you're battling something in between your ears or within your human experience. When that happens, there's this pause within life where you might go down a terrible path of hurt and destruction and depression and drinking and probably all these things for that short-term gratification of dopamine. And then as you learn and as you evolve, I think most people get to a place where they realize we're here to love. And when I watch your stuff, that's why I'm so thankful that you talked about your father's. Like I see love. You're loving people in a way from using the camera to show them, hey, like your story could be somebody else's survival guide. And you purposefully understand to not throw maybe their lowest moments. You see people for the good in them. And Greg, I call that API. When I look at humans, I do what's called assume positive intent. I give them a 10 out of 10.
Mm.
And then based on observation and experience and behavior, they might lose some points across time, but I try to give them grace. But I feel like that's an old school methodology now. I think what people are doing now is 0 out of 10, man. Prove yourself to me.
Yeah.
And unless you do something for me, I'm not gonna care. I'm not gonna bat two blinks at it. I'm just on to the next thing. And I look at that like the world is loving things and using people rather than loving people and using things. And I think when you mentioned briefly just the values that you possess as a man and as the founder of One Potato Productions and being a family man and really trying to share authenticity, loving people never goes out of style, man. It's a black tee and jeans. Like you can rock that thing until the day we die.
I I that's I should say this, and I wonder if you feel similarly. I feel like I knew that I personally had found the right career when it seemed to be trying to be successful at my job was calling out of me the very best that was in me
Mm-hmm.
and overcoming the very worst in me. Like I have those impulses where, I look somebody that's wearing the wrong colored baseball hat. That's the rival to my team, or maybe more specifically, if they're wearing a type of baseball hat that is not part of my political affiliation, I almost catch myself wanting them to behave badly so it can affirm this prejudice that I'm carrying around. And I think you're right. You start, if you start going from a 0 out of 10 on their API, you're falling into this trap. And I think that's what's happening. I think that's the divide that we're all experiencing, is not only are we growing further apart in terms of our ability to empathize with one another, but I think we're drawing further and further apart on even wanting to empathize. We're rooting for them to behave badly because it makes us feel so much better about where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've caught myself doing that, and I thought, okay, how do I fix this? I've noticed in filmmaking, I just know that's bad filmmaking, and so I really have to get prepared. And when it's, hey, cameras are rolling, action, there is something that's learned to be triggered where I have got to be my most generous. I've got to be my most honest, my most vulnerable. Now, how to duplicate that in every other area of my life, I'm still working on it like everybody else. But I wonder if you feel that way about podcasts and in the training that you've done. It
Yeah,
calls
100%.
out the very best in you.
For sure. And I think I say this time and time again. Ted Lasso summarizes it great. He goes, "Be more curious than judgmental."
Hmm.
And I find that as a mantra that just punches me in the face every day, somehow, some way. I'll judge somebody's work ethic. I'll judge somebody's mobility. I'll judge how much somebody is on their phone or their food choices. And I'm like, pause. Maybe they don't know what they don't know. Maybe they went through something and there's a reason as to why they do that particular choice and they're justifying it in their head and they're working to overcome that, which all of us has some sort of vice. And I think what it's done for me is it's given me eyes to hold space rather than try to fix every problem. And I think this is huge in the fitness space. And maybe when you're wearing the editing hat, it's easy to see every problem. Somebody comes into the gym and they've got a biomechanical issue with their squat. But maybe I don't know that they're, 5 years ago were in a car accident and they have an L4 S1 issue with their low back, or they broke their ankle, so their dorsiflexion might be a little bit off. And so rather than like rolling your eyes thinking, oh, I've got to go fix another person's squat, it's like you wonder, hey, what got them to this place? My goal isn't to make their squat look perfect. My goal is to allow them to bend the knees, hinge a little bit at the torso so it satisfies the requirements that they need to live a beautiful life according to their expectations, not according to mine.
Mm.
And I think that's an interesting thought, right? Like Tony Robbins talks about it. When you exchange expectation for appreciation, your world changes forever. And I think people are the way they are because of their OS, right? Like we update our iPhones all the time. We get prompted to do so. But we don't necessarily do that with our personal operating system. I think some of us do. Hey, I'm going to do some self improvement. I'm going to integrate some prayer, some human connection. I'm going to talk through things. I'm going to have a coach in some capacity or a healer or somebody that kind of helps me cipher through the weeds of my own biases and thought patterns. But it isn't until those things get revealed and we allow that vulnerability that we're willing to change. And what we don't change, we choose. And sometimes those choices are subconscious based on the story that we've told ourselves out of survival from the inner child when we were very, very young.
I was um, so my religious lens on the world is Christianity. But I've talked to
Mhm.
my friends who are Muslim. I've got a friend who's a Sikh. I've got a couple friends who are Buddhist. They do this thing similar. So I want to make it clear that I don't think that Christianity has a monopoly on this type of approach. It just happens to be my personal approach. But I've noticed that as I study the life of Christ and as I try and connect with him, uh, there is there is a natural updating of an operating system, and it feels as though it's as I'm ready for it. Like I'm I I find the whole process to be humbling. I in fact, anytime I'm starting to feel as though, hey, I'm making it, all I have to do is go back to that meditation and prayer, and I feel like I'm very gracefully led to some other part of me that needs some remedying, some updating. And I to be clear, I found people that a friend really close to me, an atheist, he does something similar. For him, it is just meditation and working out. There is something about that that causes him to um, constantly evaluate and take a look at it and improve. And I used to find the process to just be discouraging because I think I was like you had described, I had an expectation. I was trying to get to a finish line, and and I I've learned now just kind of enjoy this process. Um, be okay with where you are. I think it's all right to strive to be better, but the striving is what's great. And so if I have a certain weakness and if there's something about me that I'm now discovering that it never occurred to me that that was a weakness, and that's kind of humbling. I think I think humility is good, Bryce. I think discouragement is the enemy. I think
Mm,
the moment you start to feel discouraged, I've learned to label that as that that's not coming from a divine source. That's coming from an enemy, and I can learn not to pay heed to that.
I really like the way you said that. It's almost like discouragement is fogging of our lenses and the enemy trying to distract us from the mission and from the goal, to infiltrate our emotions, to depreciate our willingness to be an active participant. And I think in being an active participant, you get to practice, you get to play. And if I
The
were to take
way to
this,
put it, yeah,
go
this life is a great gift in that you get to make mistakes,
ahead. Hmm.
and if you treat it like, hey, this is all right. The goal of this life is not to get through life without making any mistakes. I mean, people have talked about this ad nauseum, but that took me a long time to figure out. In fact, I would say the reason why I spent 11 years not making movies, doing every other job under the sun except making movies, Bryce, was because I was terrified to be revealed as a bad filmmaker.
Hmm.
I had fallen in love with the idea of making movies for a living. I wanted it so badly. I loved it so much that I could not bear I could not bear facing the truth that I might not be very good at it. And
Hmm.
so I just kept delaying and delaying. And it was a fear of failure, a fear of messing up. And there's that old adage, you've heard this, and I don't even know if the story is actually true, but there's a ceramics teacher in high school and he divides his class in half and he says, all right, I'm gonna grade this half of the class. I'm gonna grade all of you on your very best pot, the very best vase, with very best whatever it is that you make. That's going to be your grade. You could spend all semester making one thing, submit me one thing, and that's going to be your grade. You guys on this other half of the class, I am going to grade you on the sheer tonnage of pottery that you produce. I don't care how good it is. Your job is to just create as much of it as you can. And the people who were going to be graded on the amount rather than the quality ended up creating far superior stuff than the people that were going to be graded on the one best vase, pot, whatever.
It's
And I have
accumulating those reps.
what's that?
It's accumulating those reps. Once you
Yeah,
put in the time and the effort to get repetition underneath your belt, it kind of falls in alignment with the 10,000 hour rule. And I think sometimes we have this perfectionist mentality or this ideology. I wrote something on this the other day. I'll be happy when, or I'll be ready when. You're
yeah,
never really ready. But that doesn't mean that doesn't happen in the timing that it's supposed to. Like time and time again, you and I both know people like this. They love taking courses. They love doing the online classes. They like going and feeling like they're sharpening the axe. And they're like, oh, by the time, I go to chop wood, I'm going to have the best and the sharpest axe. I'm going to have all the credentials. I'm going to have all the tools in my toolbox. And then the time comes to go chop the axe. And, maybe their body's not ready. Maybe they don't know the methodology as to how to do it, but they have all the right tools. They just don't know how to use them. And so now what do? They have to go accumulate the reps. And going back to what you were alluding to before, what's the best method, Greg? How do you get your foot in the door to be a documentary filmmaker? I don't know. You have to start. And that start could be education. That start could be active participation. I'd also argue that in every single one of those trades that you dabbled in when you were still going to school, you learned something from.
sure.
You got people skills, you got observation of the world, you got to see maybe when you were limousine driving, like how people communicate and the language that's used and the connection with people, and really taking care of the vehicle and trying to make sure that there's an ambiance and there's an environment that allows people to feel safe to communicate to you or to go from point A to point B. There's a lot that if you pay attention, which I know you do, you actually are kind of a sponge. And if you're Alan Watts talks about this. Like if you spend so many hours just doing one thing, you actually kind of get worse at that one thing. But when you diversify a little bit, similar to like a young child that's actively playing soccer, baseball, basketball, gymnastics, all of a sudden their body awareness and their ability to adapt to stress and chaos is a little bit better rather than just becoming a specialist. And I think modern day we are doing that to humans. We're doing that to children. Oh, you're good at this thing. You want to get a scholarship? Let's just focus on that thing. And it becomes this obsessive thing that eventually leads to burnout and psychological bias where we put ourselves in this box. But when you're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you're kind of getting the different flavors of the world, it allows you to fill your cup in the famous 5 F's: faith, family, fitness, finances, and fun. And when you have all of the flavors in each one of those buckets, the wheel rolls at a better pace, as opposed to like, hey, I'm really good at documentary filmmaking. It's like, oh, shoot, I'm struggling over here as a husband. I'm struggling with my faith. I'm struggling as a dad. I'm struggling with my finances. I'm trying to paint that picture for you because I think it happened on accident, but it was God's plan, man. It was a purpose that allowed you to learn and evolve without you even knowing it.
I, I don't doubt that. I think that that's true. I do think that um, well, both things can be true. That was sort of the path I needed to walk, and that when I was ready, then I could go and do it. On the other hand, I do think that I spent a lot of time just being afraid to have my work be judged and have me be revealed as someone that's not a great filmmaker, and then all of a sudden, I, I my dreams are dashed, right? Um, and you've got to be familiar. I just read this article the other day. I had never heard of this. They call it CLA, CLA.
Okay.
Is that ringing a bell at all?
No.
There's an article in the Athletic this week about this. It's this approach to whatever it is, whatever sport that you're playing. There, they gave an example of there was a guard for in the WNBA, and she went to this coach that prescribes to this methodology, and what he as part of her training, he had three very tall men. I think I want to say they were 6'5" or whatever. Triple team her when she got past half court, and it was they were trying to recreate extreme circumstances that would happen in a game, and then watch what her body would have to learn how to do in order to overcome that extreme challenge. And by putting her, this young guard, in all of these different scenarios that they're not exactly simulating a game, they're like taking an extreme situation in a game and saying, you somehow have to score. And these three people are going to be picking you up. And what happens is the very muscles that you need in order to thrive in your chosen career are going to be born by placing yourself in these very extreme circumstances. All of this is to say, I learned how to make a movie by going to make a movie. I was never ready, and I am never ready now. Every season of a new show that I go and do, I am terrified. The first day we are filming, I have the same experience every time. Like this, uh, I've been lucky up until now. This is not going to work out. Look, there's this, and this, and my mind will naturally go to all the reasons why this is not going to work. The only thing that's changed, Bryce, in the 20 years that I've been doing it is I've just learned to talk myself out of that, to just wait those insecurities out, because I know I don't know how to make this show, but I've learned over and over how to figure it out as we go.
Mm.
And and it's a blessing to have that be true, because if I figured out how to make all the movies I was ever going to make after the first one I make, they would all be the same movie, and they would stop being good. I think they would stop being interesting. I think part of the artists and the filmmakers who I admire, there seems to be something dangerous about them. I mean, a perfect example of this is David Bowie, who seemed to just reinvent himself with every single album, with every single new thing. And this was a guy that was trying everything. He was acting, he was writing, he was composing, he was drawing, he was into fashion. And each time, I'm sure there was this, I don't know if I'm good at this, but there was a kind of fearlessness that he at least assumed in the act of creating. I'm rambling, but I think that there is, I know that I would be better served, and a lot of the people who I know around me would be better served if you would just fall more in love with the idea of the unknown. I think LeBron loving the process, that says something, where he doesn't know how the season is going to go. He doesn't know if his body is going to hold up for his 22nd or 23rd season, but he knows he loves the process of getting ready and trying to answer those questions.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. There's something beautiful about let's see what happens.
Yeah. But it's scary too, right?
It's so scary, and I'm coaching a bunch of young kids in pursuit of some high accolades within Navy Special Warfare right now, and there's so many different tests that get thrown at them, and there's obstacle courses, and there's mental challenges and rucks and the famous Murph and navigating sleep and cold and all the different things. And I love having conversations with them around, okay, what are the 5 mantras that you lean on when things get tough? Okay, what are the 5 things that come up as far as fear? And we had this beautiful conversation yesterday where it was like, what if this thing happens? Or what if that thing happens on a negative lens? And I was like, totally fair. But what if everything goes right too? What if it becomes the most beautiful experience of your life? What if you formulate some of the most important relationships of your life? What if it all goes the way it's supposed to? I'm not saying that that's not like toxic positivity in some way, shape, or form, but it's like, hey, if you're going to acknowledge the what could go wrong, you also have to acknowledge what could go right. And we just got into this conversation of comparative culture and how so many of us, when we're striving to do something out of the ordinary that or has a high value to us and our identity and where we spend our time and our energy, we develop the spotlight effect, which you've seen time and time again in sport. The quarterback gets the ball on the 2-minute drill and they're down by 2. You see the guy at the free throw line who just got fouled, and he feels like everybody's watching him. And you see normally these people can operate in flow, and then all of a sudden when that spotlight effect is there, there's tension. The body doesn't move as flowingly as it could. And some people rise to that occasion and some people don't. But what's so interesting about it is, let's see what happens, I think is such a cool way to perceive those moments, taking into consideration how lucky am I that I get to be in this moment to explore the edges of the unknown, like you said.
Yeah, I I think that, I mean, hearing what you're saying, I would say that the fear that is overcome by allowing yourself to say, well, hey, let's see what happens, um, is a necessary ingredient to any successful project that I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first day that we began filming Last Chance U. Netflix had never done anything sports related, so they really couldn't be much help to us. And I had never done anything uh, that required that many crew members. Everything that I had done up until that time, I shot it, or it was somebody that I knew that shot it, and then I was running sound on the side, and there was maybe 2 of us as we were making it. Now we had a crew of 15 people, multiple cameras, and we were having to do this whole series. And I mean, anything that could go wrong on that first day went wrong. This production house where we rented the equipment sent us out stuff that didn't match, so the lenses couldn't be attached to the cameras. um, Everything, the when we showed up, the humidity was impossible to shoot the kinds of shots we wanted to shoot without everything being fogged. um, the I mean, I could go on and on, but I remember thinking, I remember it was my own version of let's just see what happens. Look, let's just, we have no choice. We're out here now in Scuba, Mississippi. Um, let's do the best we can. Let's shoot with what we can. And you learn this little secret in documentary filmmaking. The Netflix executives back home, they don't have surveillance cameras on you, so they don't know how bad things are going. The only thing that they're going to see is the footage you do capture. They're not going to see all the stuff that you've missed. The audience at home, they're not going to see the stuff that you missed. They're only going to see the stuff that you captured. So let's try and control that. Let's try and capture some stuff. And it's also important to remember, especially in that type of filmmaking, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Now, sometimes it's a marathon at a sprinter's pace, but it is helpful that when you have a bad day, and I had plenty of bad days, uh, there's another day. Keep coming back. Keep showing up. And I have found that um, one, my success is going to be contingent upon my ability to keep trying to solve problems. The problems are going to keep coming. My job is not to become discouraged or overwhelmed by them, but just keep trying to solve them. And then the second thing is see if the problems are trying to tell you how the film should be made.
Mm.
I'll give you a great example. This is one that I love. There's a very famous article written about Frank Sinatra by a famous journalist at the time. Gay Talese was his name. And he was given the task to go and interview Frank Sinatra. And he was a massive fan of Frank Sinatra. And so the magazine flies him out, puts him up at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And he's got an appointment to go meet with Frank Sinatra, who's recording a television special for CBS or ABC or whatever. And when he shows up, he's told that Frank Sinatra has a cold and he can't meet with them. And so he's like, ah. And so the next day, same thing. Hey, he's still got a cold. He doesn't want to meet with you. Third day, fourth day. Pretty soon he's got to do something. So he's showing up and he's interviewing his secretary. He's interviewing his bodyguards. He's interviewing the people working on the show. He's sort of just typing pages about what it's like to not interview Frank Sinatra while sitting in this hotel room or driving to the CBS lot. And at the end of the day, Frank Sinatra never agrees to an interview. And he thinks he's failed. And he writes this letter. It's this great letter to Frank Sinatra before he leaves that's in the front of this. Well, I'll get to it in a minute, but he goes home and he just has to turn in something. So he turns in something. And the name of the article that he turns in is Frank Sinatra Has a Cold. And it's a whole long article about him not interviewing Frank Sinatra. And it became it's now considered the definitive piece on Frank Sinatra. There, I have a coffee table book. Let me see if I can grab it.
That's so
I don't
cool.
want to waste time, but so you can find these books. They're now collector's items, but this is the book, and there's Frank Sinatra on the cover, and it's the whole book is this author's notes because it
That's cool.
changed journalism. But I wonder just how easy it would have been for this guy just to quit, just to like call back Esquire magazine and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I've wasted all your money, but it's not really my fault." He wouldn't agree to be interviewed. Instead, it became the thing that made it so special.
Yeah. That's so cool, man. I want to share this story with you. So this was before I connected with you the first time, back when the project was Invictus Mindset. And it launched and got off the ground during COVID. I didn't know what I was doing. Like you said, I still don't know what I'm doing. But I had this opportunity to go up to Malibu and connect and interview Laird Hamilton. And the day before, I started feeling kind of sick. I was like, oh no, do I have COVID? Like, what's going on? Like, I don't want to be around people if that's the case. So I like run over to USD. I do like 2 different COVID tests, and I try to like pay a little extra to get the rapid test so I could get the results. This was on a Saturday night, and I was scheduled to go see Laird on Monday. And so I go through this process. I'm waiting for the results. I'm feeling terrible, but I'm still like watching all his documentaries. I'm still taking notes. I'm still staying ready so I don't have to get ready. And then all of a sudden I reach out to our media team and I'm just like, hey, I'm sorry. Like I've not received results. from my COVID test, like, I think I'm going to have to cancel this trip. But I was like, stand by. If I get results, I'll keep you in the loop. I literally pull an all-nighter. I'm like refreshing my email over and over and over again. And then I get an email at 5:46 a.m. saying, hey, you're negative on your COVID test. You're all good. And so I message our team and I'm like, hey, totally understand, if this is something that's scary, or you don't feel safe about this. But we're in the clear. And I've messaged Laird and his team, and they're okay with us still coming up for the interview. And so at this point, I'm like trying to like sip on hydration, and I'm like starting to get my wits together. But now I'm like overcome with like pressure and anxiety, but also like a ton of excitement. So we leave San Diego at 6. We get up to Malibu area probably like 8:30, 9ish. Have some breakfast. The interview scheduled to take place at 10. And right when we get there, Greg, he's like, "Oh, Bryce, what's up? Let's go play in the pool." And he's all about like, pool workouts and dumbbell things and sauna and ice and all the things. And I'm just like, oh man, I'm really going to have to like take my reservoir of athletic experiences and put it into this experience now. And so we go out there, and like in the beginning, I'm like thinking to myself, I should really just remind him that I'm coming off not feeling good. And then I was like, you know what? Let's see what happens. And then another mantra that I really like is do it scared. And so anyway, we have this amazing playtime in the pool. Then we get into the sauna. We're doing like assault bike sprints in the sauna. Then he throws me into the cold tub for the first time, and I never experienced that before. And I'm like freaking out, but my ego didn't want me to get out. On the other side of that cold tub, I just felt euphoria. And he and I just like, we're like two kids just like playing around. He's like, you want to try this thing? And I'm like, sure, let's do the thing. That ends up being like 90 minutes of just like playtime in his backyard. And he's like, hey, I'm going to go change. And then we can knock out the podcast. And so we end up having just like an amazing podcast because of how much we connected during the playtime. But Greg, here's where it got interesting. His wife, Gabby, who played professional volleyball and has done some amazing things in the world. She has her own podcast, and she's done interviewing all over the world. She originally created the expectations. Hey, I'm so sorry I'm unavailable. I've got to take our daughter here, and I've got X, Y, and Z work things. So I finished this conversation with Laird, and she comes downstairs, and she's all done up. And I was like, hey, thanks so much for holding the space and letting us come in. She goes, hey, my daughter's thing got canceled. Like, you want to have me on too? And I was like, sure. I don't know why I said sure, but I did. And I did zero preparation on her. I didn't even know if we had battery life on our little Zoom 6 recorder. And so I remember going to the restroom and like splashing cold water on my face and just kind of like smacking myself in the face. And I'm like, just do it scared. And so I start the conversation with her. I don't press record yet. And I'm trying to like go back and forth to like get a feel for her energy and where I can take the conversation. And she has her legs crossed, Greg, and she has her arms crossed, and she looks at me and she goes, Bryce, cut the bullshit and press record. I'm like, fuck. And then I like really like had a moment where I'm like, those are things from a past version of her life. What's kind of going on now? And I started like picking her mind on just in her career. You look at women's sports and it's almost like sexualizing, especially volleyball. And then you think about like becoming a mom,
right?
for sure. And then you think about like being a mom and what that feels like, where it's like, oh, you're a mom now, but you had this whole identity over here. And then we started talking about like life postpartum and how your body changes and how your mind changes and what it's like serving her children and her kids. And there was this moment, Greg, where like she unfolds her arms, uncrosses the legs, and turns and kind of leans into the conversation. And in that moment, it was a feeling that I'd never felt before. That I was like, whoa, we actually like got to something that's like really meaningful and is going to add so much value to the audience. And I depict it this way because I know you know that feeling and you see it oftentimes in these documentaries. So we end up rapping back and forth to have just this incredible conversation. And when we end recording, she looks at me and points at me and she goes, I know you're new at this. I know you're navigating the loss of your father recently, and like you're full of passion. You're kind of figuring out the next step. She was like, "You're very good at this. No matter how hard it gets, don't you ever fucking quit." And I was like, "Whoa." And that's something I think about all the time in the midst of an internet issue or some challenge, or we've had, just like you, so many issues where I've had this awesome conversation and then the sound was messed up or the audio was messed up. And I think about what you said, which is the audience isn't going to see that peek behind the curtain. That's something that is part of our growing pains, and we're learning and refining our standard operating procedures. But that gave me a little bit of confidence of like, you're not being watched all the time. You can kind of keep refining in the midst of navigating all of these challenges. And I'm curious if you ever had a moment like that, or multiple moments that really lit your heart on fire where you're like, whoa, like I'm supposed to be doing this thing.
So I had, I'm an undergraduate at BYU, and I'm a political science major, and I'm thinking. I then have this feeling, and I won't go into the specifics of it, but Bryce, it was very much like that feeling you get when you're young and you're dating and you meet someone and you start to develop real feelings and you realize you really like them, and you don't know if they like you back, but you know you like them. That's how I felt about film. I, I, the idea of being a filmmaker was introduced to me. It started to like, I started to fall in love with that, and I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if film was going to love me back. But I had this dad who had never in my life ever steered me wrong. Still to this day, the smartest guy I've ever known. He's a very rare combination of extreme intelligence and and modesty and humility and patience, and a great listener. And um, anyway, so he's also, in addition to all of those things, uh, the the most prudent person I've ever met. Like he would stretch a dollar. He was driving the same car he had been driving since 1969, this Ford LTD. The odometer had turned over, and uh, he he it was held together underneath by duct tape. He's just a very practical, modest, prudent person, and some might call cheap. But I was sort of filled. I really wanted nothing more than to be like my dad. I was, in fact, majoring in political science because I thought, well, that sets me up to go to law school, and I'm going to go be a lawyer like my dad. He was a lawyer very much in the Atticus Finch tradition, just as
Mm.
fair as the day is long, but really saw it as a public service. And so there was nobody I looked up to more. And so as I started feeling these feelings that maybe I should switch my major to film, and then I thought change the course of the path that I was on, I was immediately insecure and nervous about it and knew I needed to talk to him. I needed his advice. I thought for sure, as I sort of rehearsed in my mind how this was going to go, I thought for sure the advice was going to be, Greg, this sounds more like a hobby, an interest, and I'm really glad you have it. Why not minor in film? But if you have any ambitions to be able to make a living and put food on the table and provide for a family, you probably should pick something more stable than filmmaking. That's how I imagined the conversation going. And if there was, when he would say that, I would, of course, say, Dad, thank you for setting me straight. You're right. That's why I'm calling you. And so, anyway, I'm getting on the phone. I'm kind of nervous because I'm thinking, well, this is the end now of my film ambitions, because I kind of know how this conversation is going to go, just given my dad. So I called him and I just said, "Hey, Dad, things are going great here in school. I've taken this film class." And before I could even complete the sentence, Bryce, my dad said, "Oh, I always thought you'd do something like that." And I I was so struck by that. But I will tell you that that interaction did two things for me. The first was it was in a very practical way affirming these feelings I had for this girl. Like, hey, go do this. This might work out. But the second thing was this human being who I trusted more than anyone not only believed I could do it, but like hoped I would do it. And
Mm.
that became the start for me. I was gonna so that was like a significant, powerful affirmation, and there was a certain spirit that accompanied that conversation that became for me like jet fuel. There were other moments along the way that were um, uh, like your moment with the Hamiltons, and where it feels like it just feels, hey, I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right thing. But I will tell you, and I think this has probably been true for you too. There are long stretches where you're you're just walking in the dark woods,
Mm-hmm.
and I just learned, okay, just trust in those previous moments. You're not crazy. Keep moving forward. And for 11 years, Bryce, it really was one foot in front of the other, believing it would work out, just not knowing how it would.
Yeah. No, I think that's really special. And there's something to a parent's belief. Is that something that you've taken into being a father, like really instilling belief in your children so that way they have that jet fuel behind them to push them into the right direction?
Well, I think I've got two kids that it's pretty easy to encourage them because they're both just, to me, they're talented and bright, and they're better than I was at their age. Um, and I think if they were to ever go astray, if I perceived that they were going down a wrong path, I don't think I would be shy about pointing it out. But so far, they're really kind of doing everything that I would hope that they would do. So it's sort of an organic thing. I don't think I consciously manufacture a sort of belief in them.
Yeah.
I almost think I'd be doing a disservice. I am just simply responding as authentically as I can as a parent to them,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pretty, so far, knock on wood, they're pretty easy to root for. But as I say this, as you know, there are lots of people that don't have those parental figures. They
Yep.
either don't have them present in their life, or they're a negative influence. They aren't there to support them. And I and if that's the case, they've got to find it somewhere. And I know too many successful people that didn't have that, and that actually became, I think, a real defining and driving force for why they did what they did, and or why they do what they do. Um, but I fortunately, I'm more fragile. I think I really needed it. I really really leaned on my both my mom and my dad, and at key moments they both have been there for me.
I think you captured exactly what you just mentioned very well with the early seasons of Last Chance U, where you see a lot of these kids that had these big accolades at the Power 12 schools,
Mm.
and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. They typically came from single parent households or rough neighborhoods where they went to high school, had some success and saw a way out, and then for whatever reason, whether it was disciplinary, it was school, it was getting into trouble somewhere along the line, or even injuries, they ended up at some of these junior colleges where most people would kind of write them off. And the employees or the staff were probably using that job as a stepping stone to get to something better, more lucrative, that pays more. But we talked briefly about it last time we connected. You've grabbed the true connection between a coach and a player. You've grabbed the ability to show how a school counselor can really love on these kids and listen and provide a safe space, not just academically, but almost in a motherly way and a fatherly way for the coaches. Do you think that when people don't necessarily have it, they seek it out? or that it just kind of naturally arrives in their life at the right time based on, hey, I've tried it my way. My way didn't work. And time again, I just kept trying. But now I'm realizing that something is steering me in a direction where I need some support. And seemingly at junior colleges, they're willing to receive that support because they've gone through challenge after challenge time and time again.
Um, I don't know that it always works out, but in the case of in Scuba, Mississippi, where you had Brittany Wagner, um, you know, those kids were really lucky to have her. If they didn't have her, I kind of wonder, well, where would they go? And there were other coaches too. We filmed some of these other coaches. There were some um, coaches that would take an above and beyond interest in an athlete's life, and sometimes even their personal life, and that would mean a lot to these kids who largely come to the community college broken in some way. Their psyche's broken, sometimes their body's broken, sometimes it's both. By the way, total aside, I think that there is a massive shift that we're going to see in higher education. There's just a lot of it that it in some ways just needs to be adjusted. But community colleges seem to be this place that are off. They're way more nimble than some of the more storied institutions that they will feed into. We just, as a proof of concept, we went and filmed with this startup in it's this hot startup in Silicon Valley. They're doing some really crazy, cool, weird things with artificial intelligence, and all of them are college dropouts. But they all the founder is a product of the community college system in California, and it talks about saving his life. And I think it didn't save his life necessarily because the instruction was superior, although I think there is really great instruction in a lot of these community colleges in the UC system in California. But it was community college was affording them a contact with different people, and it was these different people that were just showing an interest in them that sparked this idea. And now this guy is employing all kinds of Ivy League grads, and it was largely this dynamic that you're describing. That somebody showed an unusual interest in them. Sometimes it was a friend that they met online in community college, or sometimes it's a professor, a writing professor, somebody that isn't even going to be part of the field that they're studying. They just showed an unusual interest, and that seemed to be the thing that made the difference.
I'm so happy you mentioned this because what's coming to mind is that famous Mark Twain quote, which is, don't let schooling interfere with your education.
Yeah.
And I think you touched on that on one of your documentaries where you explored the failures of the traditional educational system. And I'm curious, like, what parallels do you see between the systemic struggles over here in education and the pressures that you've been able to kind of capture in sports?
I think if there's a one parallel lesson is we've talked about this in this podcast already, this idea that you would go to film school and you're hoping that you graduate in the same way that you would graduate from driving school with a license now to go and make films, and it just doesn't work that way. uh, Instead, you're the way that you learn how to make movies is by making movies. I found that a lot of times you were getting athletes that were very successful at the high school level, and that they were hoping that they could come and use the exact same skills that made them successful in high school and just apply them in college. And oftentimes that would be true. There is, I will tell you without naming names, the most gifted athlete I ever filmed was this guy that was a high school phenom, had had anywhere he wanted to go to school, he could go to school, and didn't have the grades, didn't have the SAT scores. Ended up in Scuba, Mississippi, and in Scuba, Mississippi, he just continued to dominate. Just could just at his respective position, there was nobody better. And still struggled with grades, but there was a couple of colleges that were going to take a chance on him. The one that he chose, they went and they've tried to fit him into this very specific offense that didn't quite match his skill set. When he was running in the community college, they just basically let him do what he wanted. Like, just let's give that person the ball and just let them do what they're going to do. And in the NFL, you see them doing that sometimes with certain athletes, where they just know, look, we have a certain offense, but within this offense, we're gonna embed a level of freedom so that your athletic gifts can be on full display and we could take advantage of those gifts. Sometimes at a level just below that, they don't know. They're scared of just giving this guy the ball and just letting him run free. And so they tried to put him in this very specific offense that held him back, and he got discouraged and disenchanted. He didn't love it and he quit. And you could, one way to look at it is maybe he just lacked the discipline to make it at the D1 level. But in talking further in the investigations that I've done, my sense was um, he was a Michelangelo and he wasn't being allowed to paint or sculpt. He was having to connect dots. And it
Oh,
was,
well
it's
said.
a
Like,
tragedy.
yeah, what's coming to mind there is when you're a black sheep and you're not conforming, inevitably there wants to be something that's going to reel you back in and get security. And I think when you get to the Division 1 level, there's a lot more money, there's boosters, there's expectations. The head coach is thinking, hey, this is how I put food on the table for my family. And they think, hey, this is my system. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm not going to make exceptions for these players. I'm going to make the players have to make compromises to fit within a system that has a proven concept. And I think there's a lot of ego in that, because I look at my high school point guard was like one of the best point guards in the country, and then ends up going to North Carolina, played for Roy Williams. And Roy wanted another point guard similar to Ty Lawson because they just came off a national championship. And he's going, hey, I want you to be just like Ty. I want you to do this, 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 and this. And it's like, you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole now. You have to
Yeah.
realize that there's a different player here, and it's going to require a different evolution of you. And you said it very well. How you go from A to B might work, but that doesn't necessarily work to go from B to C and C to D. And I see that so many times in sports. And quite frankly, it's something that, I mean, you can hear the passion in my voice, because some of these people get put into these systems that it breaks them. I mean, OJ Mayo is another great example from the basketball space. I don't agree with the style of living for Johnny Manziel, but what he did in college worked. Maybe he doesn't need to watch film. Maybe watching film actually caused a ton of anxiety and didn't allow him to creatively observe linebacker position and do all the
Mhm.
things that he did in college. And you're right, the drugs are not good for you, but they worked for Dennis Rodman. Why can't they potentially work for another player? And I'm not saying that ideology is like perfect, but if you're thinking of like, hey, I made an investment in this player, if he was really successful over here doing it, like, at least give him the opportunity to kind of play that game a little bit before you just like grind them and grind them and grind them, and that rock just turns to sand and then dissipates.
Yeah, I think that we would all be healthier if we recognize that the people sometimes who are tasked with mentoring us, they're fallible. They've got a finite amount of resources in terms of mental capacity, and so you want to glean the very best that you can from them. But I remember it occurring to me. It didn't occur to me until I was pursuing a master's degree that you could get very good at film school. You could turn in a short film and learn what the professor's tastes were, learn what they sort of liked, and go and deliver on making a movie that that professor is going to like. And also it would help if you would hang out with the professor and they would learn to empathize with you and like you. And then when they were critiquing your work in front of the class, they would be more generous with you. And I remember there's this one classmate who would spend a lot of time just, we would call it kissing up, and and uh, and I remember thinking, yeah, but your movies suck, and they're not who you really are. I remember this one professor just laying into this girl who, she was a classmate, she was talented, and she did this totally brand new thing. Like, we were all tasked with taking a scene from a play called The Owl and the Pussycat, this like 1960s Broadway play. And we each had to take a scene from it and cast it and film it. And then the whole class was going to play the act of the play back to back to back. So everybody had done like a 4 or 5 minute scene. Well, this girl took this 5 minute scene and she treated it like Godard's Breathless, this very impressionistic jump cutting, and like the script was almost superfluous. You didn't even weren't even quite listening to what the lines were being said. It was this other thing that was happening, and this subtext started to emerge. I remember it taking my breath away as I was watching it. And this professor, this old crusty professor that was a product of 1980s television and talented. She was really accomplished, like a television directing Hall of Fame. If there was such a thing, she'd be in it. But she didn't get it. And she just lambasted this poor girl. And I ran into her just a few years ago, us being out of film school. She is no longer in film. And I remember I brought up to her how totally blown away I was by that scene that she had submitted. And she was shocked. She goes, "No, that was terrible. That was the most humiliating moment of my whole time in school." And I mean, I hope I'm not, she may have a different take on it, but my sense was it extinguished what could have been a flame. And so I think that's a cautionary tale for all of us that might be in positions of mentorship, to be more nurturing, be more, your job is not to mold people into your image. Your job is to support them and coach them and fan flames. But the other thing too is, if you're one of those pupils, if you're one of those people that's aspiring, you've got to take the criticism that's being levied against you with a grain of salt, and the praise that's being given to you. The people that were praised in my film program are no longer making movies either, because they got out and they realized the muscles that they had developed and the sensibility and the voice that they had developed while in film school trying to please their professors didn't get them anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's a good lesson in that. I would hope that everyone goes wherever they go, film school or an apprenticeship, that they find somebody that's going to nurture and mentor them and inspire them. But it doesn't always work that way. And you've got to find it resilience when it's not there.
Yeah. Man is the only creature who refuses to be what he is. And the reason why that comes up is because in observing your work, many of your subjects wrestle with identity versus expectation. So what do you see in that battle between who they are and who they think they should be?
I don't know. This is what comes to mind. I think my very, very favorite subjects that I've ever filmed personally are people that seem to be completely unaware of kind of who they are. They're more interested in the world around them, and they have this quality that what the thoughts that occur to them, they just will say, and they're without any guile. The very first movie I ever made is a movie called New York Doll. I think I was given this gift of a film subject that I've never been able to match. I've been able to find others that are close, but he just was, if you asked him a question, he just answered it. And there was no agenda. He wasn't nervous that I was trying to catch him. He was just this person that kind of lived in the world in this very guileless way. And I don't know if that's answering your question, Bryce, but I do think that I spend a lot of my time trying to be impressive. If somebody asks me something, I think, well, what is it that, yeah, how can I couch this answer in such a way that people will it'll set me up for further work, because I'm seen as bright and accomplished. And I love the people, and I think we all love the people that seem to somehow have transcended that kind of petty agenda.
Mhm.
They, they're, they're, one of my closest friends. He has this quality. He really just does not care what people think about them, but
I think
he
Mark
cares a lot about
Manson does a
people.
good job summarizing this, right? Like he's the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah,
And it's
I've
like
heard about this book. Yeah,
he's a great author. I actually think you would enjoy his work a lot. He's got a great email newsletter as well. But he's one of those people that has that quality. And when I say that, sometimes it gets taken out of context that like, oh, he's just off kilter. It's like, no, not really. He's just, like you said, observing and being and just answering in the moment, knowing that people are going to judge you for the good, the bad, everything in between. And he doesn't really care about being judged. He's just, like you said, authentically in the moment. And that's what we see in dogs. That's what we see in children. Children are so freaking honest, and sometimes it hurts, but it's so beautiful to see something operating from a capacity of just being.
yeah. I'm curious, like somebody who's studied this, when do we lose it? Because I think kids all naturally have it. And at varying stages, you start to learn to edit yourself
Yep.
and to present a certain expectation of what you have of yourself to the world. And I think intellectually, we all know that's that's a losing formula. That doesn't make us more attractive. We hate people that do it to us. So why do we do it to other people? And I'm curious when that gets lost. There is a moment when a certain kind of innocence is lost,
Yeah.
and you you stop just being who you are. And it's the rare gifted individual that is able to maintain it into adulthood.
Yeah. If I were to take a stab at this one, I would say if you have incentive, you can then predict behavior going backwards. For most humans, we've created this incentive model, both positive and negative. Positive in the sense that, there's a goal, negative in the sense that everything not in alignment with the goal might start to fade away. And so, as a byproduct, you think about disciplining kids. If they do certain behavior, they get isolated or they get spanked or they don't get love, whatever the parenting style is for the individual, or they get their iPad taken away. When they do good, it's like, oh, you get a treat or you get the iPad or you get to go play with your friends. And we create this incentive model, which then starts to program our behavior. Hey, when I do these things, I get love. When I don't do these things, I get neglect.
Hmm.
And I think over the course of time, like you said, we start to edit ourselves thinking, oh, when I speak eloquently, more people will listen, or I get complimented more, or I get this life validation. And I think when you speak a little bit unfiltered, at least for the last 2 decades, I would say, I think that's sort of starting to change now. I would say it gets almost weaponized. Oh, you should think before you speak, or, you shouldn't speak like that, or holding that one standard. If you say one thing, now it's documented, it's filmed, or it's used against you like, oh, you're a flip-flopper now, or whatever
Yeah.
label that comes with it, not realizing that like as humans we are malleable creatures that like we upgrade, we downgrade, we go up, down, left, right. But I think the human mind, going back to our education system, is ingrained to think like Greg, documentary filmmaker. It's like, no, Greg is Greg. Greg is a
Yeah.
creator. He is a human being in the world that happens to do this thing that's become an occupation. But our brains, the way we conceptualize is we label, we create titles. Based on those titles, we determine level of respect. I mean, I can tell you time and time again, leaving professional sports in both basketball and CrossFit, like you go to like a dinner party and people are like, back in the day, dude, I saw you on ESPN. That was so cool. Da da da. And then 5 years later, when you're done and you're brand new to the podcast space, people are like, oh, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I started this podcast thing. I'm storytelling and coaching and creating this brand. People are like, huh, interesting. And look at the difference in that it takes the right person to spend time with self and learn and grow and evolve and be able to filter that, to then be like, no, no, I'm following my heart center and my life's purpose. But that's tough for most humans when you're getting all this love for this thing over here and then you don't get it over here. It's a process of growth and development. I think that exact thing kind of happens with children. And then in this capitalist society, it's like, hey, if you do this thing, you're going to get paid really well. And it
Mm-hmm.
seemingly creates a path, like you said, like, oh, doctors, lawyers, like that's well respected. That's going to have a lot of money. It's going to provide security for your family. It's X, Y, and Z thing that's held in a high notoriety. But when you're in a creator, it's not as stable. So it's like very cool that you have had a series of moments to have the bravery to like take that leap. But I think a lot of humans will sacrifice what they want most for security and certainty.
And I certainly sympathize with that choice. I anybody that has at one point or another had something they thought they wanted to do, but they felt like, the more responsible thing is to do X. I don't want to demonize that, because I I think the moment you decide that you're gonna follow your bliss, you're gonna this inkling of a thing that just seems crazy to everybody else except to you, and then if you're fortunate, somebody who's very close to you that affirms it. Um, I it's a tough road. Those 11 years, Bryce, were hard, and in some moments humiliating, just tough. Um, Fortunately for me, I was educated. I'd educated myself into a corner. I had no choice but to just keep trying and to figure it out. And it eventually worked out. But I can't dismiss the amount of luck that finally fell into place in order to even get my first break. And so, you know, I've got a son, and he loves film, maybe even more than I did at his age, and he's really good at it. But I've noticed I just have to. I find myself preparing him for, okay, look, some of this is going to you might face some tough times, and here's some things, and here's some things that I learned. But all along the way, I'm realizing I I cannot give him a blueprint, because the one that worked for me, well, that it was destroyed in the act of me using it, so it doesn't exist anymore. But I do think what is true is there is this thing that you're called to do, and even if it seems hard and scary, I think your life is infinitely more happy and fulfilling if you pursue it than if you don't. That's my
Mhm.
belief.
What are your thoughts on you've been married to Aaron for quite a few years now. What are your thoughts on
26 years in 1 month.
congratulations, man? That's so special.
Thanks.
When there's uncertainty and chaos in career, you kind of need stability in home. If there's chaos at home, you typically are trying to create stability in career, or at least that's my observation. Not for everybody, but for many people.
Mm.
And I think
That's
when following the creative pursuit, you need that stable home because there's no blueprint. You're carving a path forward with a machete up a really steep mountain with the wrong shoes and bad weather conditions. But then
yeah.
coming home, being able to have those vulnerable conversations, somebody that reaffirms, that sees like the majority of you, as opposed to you not feeling seen at all and coming home to an empty place or, just going to the bar after work or whatever. I think there's something to that being a huge part of the recipe. So you can go have bravery and risk tolerance out in the world and then come home and have a little bit more safety.
I think I'm reminded. We once went on a vacation with a group of friends who we love years
Hmm.
ago, and everything that could go wrong went wrong. We'd rented these catamarans that had you could sleep on them, but the the sewage backed up on it. The captain that was supposed to be there wasn't there, so they had some other captain that came on that didn't know how to do it. So we couldn't go to half the places we wanted to go to. It was ran out of food. We were short on water. It was awful, but it was one of my favorite vacations I've ever been on because the people I was with were so great and I loved them so much and we had so much fun. It seemed like the challenges that we faced just made it funnier and better. And I look back with such fondness on that time. That's being married to my wife, Erin. That during those 11 years, and a good chunk of those years, I was married, and uh, it's like being on a really challenging trip abroad, and you're facing all kinds of difficult circumstances. And if I'm with her, it it's the time of my life. Uh, Conversely, if you're with people you don't love, and it's you don't have those that mutual feelings of friendship, and you could be in the most pristine circumstances that exist on planet Earth. You could be in the nicest five-star hotel, waited on hand and foot, and it could be miserable. I'm
Mhm.
convinced of it. So I think your point is exactly valid. There are two things that I can point to that have been as instrumental as anything in terms of the success, even the modest success that I've enjoyed. The first was the support of my dad, and then the second would be the love and companionship of my wife.
Yeah,
Without both of those, I know I wouldn't. I know I would not be doing what I'm doing for a living. I
for
know
sure.
that.
When you look at America's Sweethearts and just kind of bridging what you did previously with other documentaries, and now you're in the environment of the NFL. There's a lot going on. There's all kinds of pressures. There's players, there's contracts, there's money. And then you've got the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. They're famous. There's a lot of competition. I'm sure there's a lot of different energies flowing in and out of that. As you kind of made the decision with your team and with your production company to go take that pursuit, what was the starting point of that process like for you being in an environment like that after having been in other environments that maybe didn't carry as much weight or pressure, eyes and ears?
Let's say that in an alternate universe that my career started with the Dallas Cowboys and America's Sweethearts. It would have been a disaster uh, for a couple of reasons. But the biggest reason would have been when you have a brand that's as big and as powerful as the Dallas Cowboys, and they approach you, you almost feel this pressure to just give them what they want. And I've fortunately have 20 years of making movies, and I've learned that there are certain non-negotiables to this particular style of authentic filmmaking. One, you have to have a certain access. You have to insist upon it, and if you don't have that access, don't do it. You just won't make anything that you're proud of. The second thing is you need to maintain editorial control. It's a that's a basic journalistic principle, but it's one that gets lost more and more when entertainment bleeds over into journalism, which documentaries certainly do. Documentaries hope to be big and popular and gather a wide audience, and so they are both journalism and entertainment. But in order for it to really be good, in my estimation, you have to maintain certain journalistic standards, and one of those is you have to have editorial control. And I probably very, very early on in my career would have been easily pressured into giving that up. I don't do that now because I know that where that leads. I know that what will happen, not there's a chance it will happen, Bryce, but invariably it will happen. The very best stuff will be edited out of your movie if you cede editorial control, because there is a basic human tendency to want to edit out the most interesting and most revealing parts of who you are. And so whether you're doing an organization or you're doing a single subject, if you were to go and film them and get the most vulnerable, interesting moments out of them, those are the first that they'll want edited out. And the great tragedy is it's those moments that cause a worldwide audience to fall in love with them. They're those moments of complication, those moments of nuance, the moments when somebody's real humanity leaks out. Those things terrify us personally. We don't want them out there. But I've learned as a storyteller, that's the currency. Those moments are what's needed to make not just a great show, but make the audience love these people. And so I've just learned to guard that. And you know, when to get back to how that came about, the Cowboys approached us. They were well briefed on what I needed as a filmmaker to do the work that I do. And so even before they came to me, they were saying we know that you need editorial control and we know that you need this kind of access. We've seen your work and we're fans of your work. And so we want you to tell us, what do you need? And we want to give that to you because, I mean, to the Cowboys' credit, they have allowed us to do a real documentary about this very storied institution that is revered around the world. And and I would say, to their credit, they know what they have. They know that they can afford to be transparent with us because because they're the ones that invented it. But still,
Yeah.
it was a huge leap of faith on their part, and a huge amount of credit goes to them, and the success of the show goes to them and their faith in the process.
That's awesome. Did you get ideas early on in the pursuit of Last Chance U, and then later Cheer, and then obviously the Last Chance U basketball version, which was super cool, and then obviously America's Sweethearts? Were you motivated at all by Hard Knocks and kind of seeing the peek behind the curtain with some of those different teams and how those were filmed?
I should say I have never seen Hard Knocks. I've now seen clips because they'll show up on my YouTube feed or my Twitter
Yep.
feed, and so it's not like I'm unfamiliar with the show. I will say I was a massive fan as a kid of NFL films.
Yeah.
I would watch those over and over and over, and so I've heard of the comparisons between Last Chance U and our show. I have a feeling, as people have explained to me, there is a difference, and I think one of those
Oh,
differences,
yeah.
Bryce, might be what we just touched upon. NFL Films, while it's distributed by HBO, the Hard Knocks show, it's produced by NFL Films, and so if they're, I'm not saying that they are. Um, I'm not saying that I know firsthand that they are editing out things that would otherwise be interesting. They may be trying to adhere to the same journalistic standards that we adhere to. But I could also say that there is an inherent conflict of interests if you're NFL Films. They are owned, there's a brand and they want very much to protect that brand. And I think there's a reason why, if there is somebody that's going to be embarrassed on that show, it's going to be most likely somebody that it's never going to be the brand of the NFL.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you're spot on there, and I would say I would speculate that it is heavily edited. They do have unique storylines, but they're pretty focused on football for the most part. I know they've recently come out with quarterback. They've also come out with a receiver show, and they're fun to watch. They're kind of cool. My favorite part about those shows, though, is they have this like hazing thing that they do with every rookie, where they have to get up in front of the team and they have to sing a song. And it to me is so fun because it starts like kind of awkward. You see, like they don't really have the rhythm that good, and then all of a sudden the teammates start getting into it and they start clapping. They're like, "Hey, hey!" You start hearing the banter from the background, and then you just see the energy and the vibe kind of pick up. And if I literally think about Hard Knocks, that's my favorite part of that show. It's like, yeah, you get the football, like they do a good job making the sound cool when they're getting hit and whatnot, but the real human component, like you said, the vulnerable moments stand out. And to me, I think Brene Brown said it. She said, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. And something about that like is just so cool to watch. And I think that's what you're doing with your craft is you're finding ways to tease out vulnerability, which is courageous, and it's granting the consumers the willingness to be more vulnerable. And I've found myself being more vulnerable on this show, being more vulnerable with friendships and with relationships.
Yeah.
Previously, being fearful of vulnerability, that it was going to be weaponized against me in some capacity, but then realizing I don't care. It's fun to storytell and share experiences and riff back and forth, and that leads to the best types of connections and conversations. Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinyan Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinyan is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag, or even an overnighter. Kinyan's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinyan.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if you go back to the Hard Knocks example, what Hard Knocks has done is they've got years and years and years of institutional knowledge,
Oh yeah.
and so the football stuff is going to be, they're going to shoot it in a way that I don't mere mortals aren't going to be able to recreate. But those moments that you're describing of somebody getting up and they're being hazed and they're first they know that that happens, but I would have a feeling that what is truly touching you about that moment is here is a vulnerable rookie. And what is more intimidating than facing these NFL vets, many of which probably you have their posters of them on your wall and you've looked up to them, and forget even the very practical thing of this is a job interview. I'm trying to make a living
Yep.
doing this. I'm now going to do this very humiliating thing of singing in front of these guys. And then the team turns and starts supporting them. At
Mm-hmm.
first, they're kind of making fun of them. And then they turn and they realize, because they were once rookies themselves, and it's a very human thing now. I'm going to now choose to support this guy. We're going to cheer this. We're going to help this guy on, and they're responding to their courage by willing to even fulfill the assignment of sing, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I yes. So I would I I've now got to go watch the show, I guess. But I I I too respond to those moments. And as a documentary filmmaker, and I'm sure the people at NFL Films feel the same way, when you catch moments like that, you just feel so privileged. It's such an honor. You're in the moments. You're not the author of them. You're just there capturing them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's such a thrill to be the instrument in which you get to now share this magic moment, this thing, this lightning caught in a bottle. You get to be the one that shares that with with a broader audience. I just found there's no high quite like it. There's nothing. There's no. I've never found professionally a feeling that's quite like it. I hope I'm not rambling on too much, but I'm just remembering I was not one of those kids that was born with a camera in his hand and ran around and just made movies as a kid. I didn't do that. But I had this one experience in high school where we were placed in charge of our school's talent show, It was called the I went to a school called Interlake High School in Bellevue, Washington, and we called it the Interlake Follies. We'd actually lifted it from a neighboring high school that had the Newport Follies. So we did our version of that. And it was going to be this big night, and all these different acts were going to be performing. And we had to organize the acts. And there was a certain gap, Bryce, like it was, I guess you'd call it an intermission, that we needed to kind of, we were afraid we would lose our whole audience unless we did something. And so me and my buddy made a short film, and we'd never done it, but we thought, oh, this will be funny. We're going to just do this short film. We're going to get teachers to kind of act in it. And it's this, we're going to make it like a faux documentary. Anyway, I'm sure I would be humiliated of it if I were to see it today. I don't think it exists. But I remember it was back in the days, I'm old enough that we didn't have a big enough projector to show I think there was probably 1,000 people when you're counting parents that were all showed up to this talent show in this big auditorium. Maybe it was like 800. It was packed. And so what we did is we took every VCR in the school, and it was like a VCR TV combo. Do you remember those big things that
Oh
you
yeah.
would lug into classrooms? So VCR TV combo, and we had this guy, Greg Carl. He was our AV student expert. He found a way to rig every VCR to itself. So if one VCR was playing, every TV screen would play it. I mean, nowadays that's normal. Back then that was like voodoo. I thought like this was a witch doctor that somehow he knew how to do this. So we made this short film, we played it, and then I remember the stage, and the curtain was closed on the stage, and I was backstage with my buddy. We hit play in the black, and so the intermission, it goes dark, and the audience is sitting there, and I remember sitting backstage with my buddy, and I remember thinking, oh man, what if they hate this? This is going to be horrible. But then you could hear people start to chuckle at jokes, and then it rolled into laughter, and then rollicking laughter. And then I remember I just remember, I think it was about a 4 or 5 minute film. And I remember just like I was riding waves of euphoria, hearing this laughter, hearing people like what we had done. I feel like I've been chasing that feeling ever since. That
Mm.
there'll be a moment where you're on hour 13 of a 18-hour day filming, and you're just waiting for this thing that will happen that will connect this story to that story, so that I'll be able to metaphorically be backstage with my buddy again, hearing audiences respond on social media or Twitter or some premiere that Netflix has organized. It's the best. It's just the best feeling. It's like having this story that you know is a great story, and there are these people you care about, and you're about to go tell them this story, and you know they're going to love it. There's nothing, Bryce, and maybe I'm just wired to really love that, but
No, that's
I
special. And the way you described it, I can like feel it, which is so cool. The thing that I'm curious about here, Greg, you love that feeling. You love documentary filmmaking, and you love creating unique moments to pull authenticity out of people. But none of that has to do with the legalities of your job, some of the tech and getting to understand lenses and fogging of lenses and humidity and sound issues and scheduling and managing people in a team, keeping them motivated to stay on the journey with you, where maybe they're not getting any wins for long stretches of time. There's more that goes into you doing the craft that isn't always forward facing. What's enabled you to develop the discipline and the willingness to realize, hey, more than a documentary filmmaker, I'm a problem solver, and I am a human being that's trying to set the stage and the parameters to pursue and to create greatness. But there's a lot in the in between, in the intangibles of your craft, that isn't always sexy, that isn't always fun. Have you kind of figured out how to process and manage those things at an elite level?
well, so first, Bryce, I the last 10 years that I've been making movies, I've been blessed with incredible people around me. I reached a certain place where the projects became at a certain budget level where I could go and afford to pay some of these friends who I've been begging before to come and work with me. And so, you know, right now there's a cinematographer, Jonathan Nichols, who um, eh, he's just so good at what he does that under extreme circumstances, he's learned how to keep the lenses from being fogged. He's learned how to solve. There's a woman named Cassie she does all kinds of things, but one of the things that she does is she will clean and prep all of the gear at the beginning and end of each day. And so there's a myriad of problems that are immediately avoided because she's just so good at her job. Now, that being said, there are a lot of things about my job that are not very glamorous. I don't love doing them. I just consider them the price of playing poker. But going back to that feeling I had with my buddy backstage, you, I'm, I willingly do them because the high that I know that comes with having a hit show and is so big. It's so great that yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm almost a crack whore, Bryce. I'm just like I'll do anything. Yeah, yeah. I don't love the meetings that I have to have with our legal team. Sometimes I don't love um, the all the different planning and the logistics and the travel but you just do it because the high is so great.
The reward is bigger than the risk.
Yeah.
What was it like the first time you're sitting at home with your family and you open up Netflix and you see one of your shows as like, the forefront and being advertised and marketed by Netflix, and you're just sitting there maybe having this panorama view of like everything you went through just to get to that moment? What's that level of pride like, knowing that you kind of got to a place and you're still in pursuit of the place, but that has to feel pretty good just to like see like, whoa, like we did something pretty cool here.
Yeah, it is. I'll say the way that it manifests to me is a little different because um, a little bit about our process. There is, let's say, in a 7 episode show, each of those episodes, you're going to have um, you're going to have 6 cuts of that show, and even in that 6 cuts, there's many, many, many edits before you even get to the first cut. And so by the time it launches on Netflix, you have seen the show so much that I have no interest in watching it on Netflix. So I've never seen one of my shows on Netflix. But what I do get to the what does get to happen is I get to hear from family and friends and from people who worked on the show that didn't get to go through the experience of delivering all those cuts, who are seeing it for the first time. Jonathan Nichols, oftentimes, the cinematographer, or at least the people that are supporting the camera department, they've never seen even one cut before it comes on Netflix. And the level of pride and satisfaction that I hear in their voice over their hard work that's now been shaped into a story that can be digested by a broad audience, and they have friends and colleagues that are reaching out to them and saying, great work, man, look at that work. And that is extremely satisfying. That never gets old. That is super fun. I can remember the first time I ever directed and produced a feature documentary film. It premiered at Sundance. So the first time it had ever been seen, because we were working on it right up until the time it premiered, was the actual premiere itself. And it was terrifying and exhilarating and very similar to being backstage with my buddy in high school. It's when it works, Bryce, there's a high like nothing else. But also, I've also been in screenings when it's failed, and it's humiliating. This is an interesting part of the process that you might appreciate. You get so close to the footage, you've spent so much time with it, that you've now bumped up against a wall where you can no longer objectively view it. And you need to have an audience with you. And so I have learned, as I'm making a show, there are pockets of people that I will invite over to my house, and I'll say, okay, sit down, and I'll make them popcorn, and I'll go, okay, we're going to watch a rough cut of the show. And I know it's going to be brutal. I know that the cut doesn't work, but I don't know why it doesn't work. And so when I sit there, I will get a seat behind them. I've got a couch that I'll have 4 or 5 people sit in front, and then I'll sit behind, and then I'll watch the show. But for the first time, I'm watching it through their eyes, just having them in the room. They don't have to say one thing to me. In fact, often these friends that I've invited over, they're just very polite, and they want to encourage me. But I will want to dig a hole and crawl into it at different points during the rough cut viewing, because it's just not working, and I now see why, and it's humiliating. It's embarrassing. And I just learned I have to go through that. I have to be willing to do that, because otherwise it won't ever get better. It won't ever improve.
It's really
And so,
powerful. I think that's a strong part of the process that you just shared there, that it doesn't feel good, but being able to shift your perspective and see it through somebody else's lenses. And also because you're behind them, you can see organic body language. You
yes.
can see when they lean in, you can see when they laugh, you can see when they tense up or they cringe or those types of things. Do you sit back there with a notepad, or are you just allowing yourself to observe this, knowing that the feeling you have, and then you try to revisit it? Like, I'm just assuming there's so much going on in your head throughout the entirety of the process. Like, do you timestamp, like what does it look like on the other side of this when you're funneling this into the editing process with your team?
Yeah, I mean, I can show you. I take notes on my phone, um, and it's a yeah, it's it it's two things. I mean, so my notes will just kind of look like that, and
Yep.
a lot of times they're going to have time codes next to them, um, like, you'll see that there's a running time code on a rough cut
Hmm.
that we've uploaded, and we watch it, so that's for note taking purposes. But the thing that is just as important, if not more important, is these feelings that I'm feeling where, oh my gosh, this is dragging so much. What possessed me? What possessed me to have this scene go this long? This is so self-indulgent, and it's that kind of feeling. And so my note might just say trim, but I know when I get to that point that it was a colossal, it feels like a colossal failure on my part, that I wasn't able to anticipate it. I've learned to kind of weather that.
Yeah.
Um, uh, uh, just because there may be some people that are listening that are sort of wonky, I've had to learn that the more you show, the more you go through rough cuts, the tendency is to start overcutting, because one cheap way to maintain an audience's interest is just have things move quickly from one scene to another, and so there just isn't time to get bored. But that's the best way to neuter your movie and to remove the humanity, because those most compelling moments happen after a scene is just sort of quiet. There's a moment, and the audience is even wondering, why are we holding on this shot, and then there's this thing that will happen. And so sometimes you make the mistake of lopping off all the stuff that precedes the thing that gets the audience, and you haven't prepared the audience, so it feels like a nothing moment. So it's
So well said. That's like CapCut, man. Like when you're trying to edit stuff with AI technology, it's just trying to be entertaining more
oh,
than educational or more than trying to add value. It's just trying to entertain, and I don't like it as much. It
oh
definitely
no,
depreciates the value for sure. And that's what I wanted to ask you next. Like you've obviously gone through the process. You're talking about using VHS back in the day, and then it's DVD, and now everything's digital. As things have changed and evolved, now we're seeing short forms and commercials being made with AI. How does that change your craft personally, as far as like the process of it? Is it a lot faster now? Is it a lot easier? Is it tougher because you have to prompt things a certain way? And does it depreciate your level of respect for some of the up and comers that seemingly have it a little bit easier? I know in basketball is kind of like that. Like, oh yeah, if I had access to all these different, hyperbaric chambers and cold tubs and saunas, like my body feel that way too. Like I've heard MJ kind of reference that a little bit in
Yeah.
correlation to the athletes that have had, very long careers.
Well, I think artificial intelligence is a tool. For instance, with us, we will use an artificial intelligence tool to create a transcript that we used to hire um, uh, people that would transcribe every interview that I had shot or the dialogue of any scene that was shot. And it's helpful because as soon as you enter that into a database that's connected to we edit in Adobe Premiere, and as soon as you have that properly cataloged, you can type in a keyword and it's going to pull up all the times that Kelly Fineglass is appearing in a scene or saying something. And so that's helpful. And now you have an AI tool that can do that. I've seen some of the stuff that's being quote unquote produced, and you know, I think we just have to assume at this point that people are going to get better at AI is just going to get better rather at doing and creating film that will be moving to a wide audience. But to be honest with you, I've been wrestling with this concern for years with regards to reality TV. I've always been concerned and nervous that there's a certain authenticity that we're striving for that an audience would be just as happy to watch something far less authentic and it's still entertaining. It's just kind of background noise, as they're doing other stuff. And so I think the same. I think our challenge as human artists is to double down on our humanity. That's the thing that's going to be the hardest to duplicate. I think it's going to be able to create certain kinds of reality TV programs like that, and I think there's going to be a whole industry that's going to be out of business pretty soon. What I think
Hmm.
it's going to be harder to do is sharing someone's humanity. I look at the very best moments of the stuff that I've been a part of, and I can feel me in it. I can feel a certain sensibility of who I am there. I can feel my dad in some of these moments, um, and so that's I think the last to go. And I could see a day, Bryce, where in the same way that we go and try and find people um, that make cheese the old way. It's not this mass-produced stuff, but it's there are these families in France and in England that produce these ancient cheeses. They've been doing it for years and years and years, and they the people just prefer how they taste. But it's hard to do because you have to use a very long, laborious, inefficient process to do it. Um, and I don't think they're making as much money as craft cheese singles, but they still are able to make a living. I wonder if that's where I go eventually. I'll be this guy that's I'm the documentary filmmaker that's the equivalent of an old person making cheese in their own small little family farm, and there's just going to be a certain audience that's going to prefer that.
Yeah, that's definitely a potential for sure. I also really think, man, that the long, laborious process that maybe is inefficient, it's pretty cool just to go through the process. And what reminds me of that every year is the holidays. And whether you decorate your house for Halloween, or you do things for being festive for Thanksgiving, or you set up Christmas lights, and it seemingly is a pain in the ass every year. Like last year, I fell off my ladder 4 times doing Christmas lights, and it was just like annoying in the moment, but then super funny because one of my neighbors caught it on a Ring camera and started like laughing at me about it. He's like, "I saw you trying to wrap your palm tree in Christmas lights." But something about that process is so cool. If I could just press a button and have the Christmas lights up, it wouldn't have as much meaning. When you're making dishes on Thanksgiving that, have lived in your family for years, when you make it from scratch and everybody's slicing and dicing and there's dogs running everywhere, and the oven smells like this, or maybe you have a power outage because there's too many things going at once. That's the story. That's the thing. And I think if you just have immediate gratification, it doesn't have the same meaning. It doesn't align with what it feels like in your heart. Like you said, that feeling backstage with your buddy. And I think if we can continue to educate, motivate, and inspire people and have them actually experience that themselves, it makes it so much more worth the process. For example, losing a ton of weight, knowing the sacrifices that you put in, and then seeing your body, your mind, and your heart and your health biomarkers so much better over here versus just, getting lipo or taking some sort of medication, and all of a sudden you like are sort of there, but you didn't really go through the process. That right there, I think, is, at least in our lifetime, is going to continually float to the surface and have long term value add to the headspace of the human experience.
I think that's well put. There's a filmmaker named Werner Herzog, and he did this film Fitzcarraldo, and in the script, it's a movie about a guy that has a dream of, um, the dream requires that he get a steamboat into the Amazon River, and to do that, he has to drag a steamboat over a mountain. So that's a
Mhm.
key point of the movie. Now, normal filmmaking, you would just cheat it. You would, show the struggle, but you wouldn't actually pull a steamboat over the. Well, Werner Herzog believed that the success of this movie, the aesthetic success of this movie, would be contingent upon him actually pulling a steamboat over a mountain. And so he does it at great, great physical, emotional, financial expense. And he's right. There is something about the movie. The movie, I think, could be largely forgettable were it not for this weight that you feel. And you only learn later that, oh, that guy physically actually pulled that thing over a mountain into the Amazon River. That's how he did that. And I don't think you can fake it. I
Yeah.
think, but, I do worry that audiences might lose their taste for it.
Yeah. We'll see, man. I definitely think I've heard Rogan and a few others talk about it. Some of these white collar jobs, doctors, lawyers, I think those ones, computer programmers, like you said, transcription experts, some of those jobs are definitely starting to shift or go away relatively quickly. The human jobs, I think, are going to really fight to hang on, like you just said. But AI is definitely moving at a pace that's faster than I could have possibly anticipated by any means. Lastly, man, the clubhouse. What was it like going from the NFL to the MLB and being in that type of environment? It seems like now, like, you've danced a little bit in many arenas, and I'm curious the flavor of the MLB for you.
Oh, I mean, spending that year with the Red Sox, I just loved it. That, very much like the Dallas Cowboys, they were saying, yeah, no editorial control, come and film. That show was a very difficult show to do. We were a pain. I am sure that we were a pain in the butt to a lot of people, like the clubhouse manager, the person that handles the logistics of her travel, the security risk that we were with the film crew following these guys. But everyone, including the players, the manager Alex Cora, the front office, they could not have been cooler. They could not have been better. I just wish we'd done it this year. I just wish
Mm,
we filmed what they're going through this year. We were just a year too early. I should say this. I wish we were allowed to film a second year, because the first year, I don't think players quite knew what we were doing, and then once they saw that, I had some players reach out and say, "Oh my gosh, I hope you're coming back. I didn't realize this is the show you're making. This is really cool."
yeah.
And the show was really hard to make, and I think it was, from Netflix's standpoint, it was a one-off, and I think we were such an imposition that from the Red Sox, at least the front office, that was probably a one-off. but I wish we could have been allowed to do a second year because I think it would have been, I think we would have been able to capture some of the candid, never before seen moments that you're used to catching in you're used to seeing in Last Chance U, and we did get some, but we would have got them with at a much greater frequency in year two. I think that's what happened with us in the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders is that we got some very candid moments from
Yeah.
a group of young women who are used to being very buttoned down. They're very polished. They're pageant ready, you know.
Yeah.
And once they saw the stories that we were trying to tell, the second season got better than the first season. And I suspect we'll just maintain that trajectory. I hope.
There's something that gets unlocked when you build that trust for sure. What's next for you, man? What are you working on?
We're doing a third season of the Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders show. There's a couple of other non-scripted shows that we just have in development. But the thing that I've been we're now looking at Netflix has asked to look at some of our non-scripted stuff that we've done and to create create a scripted project out of them. And so
Hmm.
that's been kind of interesting. It's a new process for me. It feels scary, like it did for me back in the old days of creating non-scripted stuff. But yeah, we'll see where that goes.
Very fun, man. Well, I really appreciate you sharing with us all that's kind of come about since we last spoke and seeing all the different highlights that you've had and now multiple different arenas of sport, of storytelling, of documentary filmmaking. I'm stoked to see your face and connect with you and be able to share some of these things with our community and also show the authentic creative process that it's not always rainbow and butterflies, that there's definitely some challenges along the way, but they're all part of being in pursuit of that feeling that you so eloquently described.
Well, Bryce, I said it the first time we did this a few years ago. I did not know that you had this gear, but it doesn't surprise me in the least. You were this incredibly talented fitness coach, and I think you've just transferred these specific talents that you have into this space, and I'm so glad to see your success. It's just it's inspiring. It's been really great being with you again.
This was super fun. If you could leave a little bit of wisdom, if you were to put something on a billboard while somebody was driving down the freeway and you could just kind of drop a little nugget into their headspace, what's something that you'd like to leave with people?
Hmm. I think if it has to be on a billboard, it's got to be short. I texted this to my daughter late last night. Um, it's a psalm. Be still and know that I am God.
Hmm.
And I think if there's an application to the things that we've been talking about here, I would say that the application is everything can be falling down around you, um, and that muscle of being confident, being still, I think will allow you to transform the liabilities around you into assets. Very much like that writer did that was writing that article on Frank Sinatra for Esquire magazine. He he was able to be still and a certain kind of this thing that was the huge stumbling block actually became the key piece to that article's success and his success. I I wonder how often I've missed opportunities in my life because I wasn't still enough.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. I think that's great value that you just added to your daughter and to the world. My mom used to say, "Do your best and forget the rest," and it sounds so simple and cliche,
Oh, I think there's
but I'm just like, wow, like you said, everything could be going wrong around you, but being able to make your best of the opportunities that are given is a special way to just keep putting one foot in front of the other for sure.
well, you control what you can control. You can control the whether you're doing your best or not.
Hmm.
and then the rest of the outcomes, they're going to be what they're going to be.
Totally. Greg, you're a special human, man. This was super fun.
Oh,
Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with Greg Whiteley today, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time.